Good to see everybody again tonight, and happy to be here with you again. If you would, bow with me in prayer. Our Holy Father and God, we come to you with praise and with thanks, with joy, with sorrow, with all of who we are on the inside. Father, we come to you whoever we are and wherever we are in life, whatever's going on in us, and we want to still honor you and praise you regardless of what's going on in our lives. We know that you care for us, and we know that you are stable. You are the person who is always there, even when no one else may not be there. Father, we thank you for this. Thank you that we're your creatures who you care for, and that when you saw that we needed salvation, you jumped in and did it yourself. You did it for us. Help us, Father, that we may be the people that complement what you have done for us by living our lives for you and in a way that will give you honor and glory. Father, each of us have come from different places in our spiritual walk. Some just beginning, some have been there for a long time, but each of us, as you know, we have our own struggles, our own yuck in our own lives, and Father, you're leading us and guiding us to learn how to work through that, and I pray that you'll help each of us in that. Father, we also know and thank you that you've put people on this earth, they're people, humans, people like us that are here that can help and comfort one another, that each person in your body has an ability to be a presence or an ability to have a word or an ability to do something to strengthen and help each of us to be better people and to calm and to heal our wounds. Father, each of us, regardless of who we are, whether it's me as a counselor or minister or someone else who is doing some other type of work in their life, we're all wounded healers. Help us, Father, to take our woundedness and to help others with their woundedness. Help us to see, as we try to minister and let you minister to our wounds, help us to reach out to others to minister to theirs as well. Father, give us wisdom in how to do that, because oftentimes we are well-intended but don't always know how to do it. But we know that you're able to bring about things that are impossible for us, but there's nothing impossible for you. And we praise you for that. And we ask, Father, this prayer and ask for your blessings on us tonight as we talk about the things that we do tonight. I ask that these will be a blessing to people in this room and even outside of this room. Help us to take this and use it in our own lives and also to help others in theirs. So, Father, we make this prayer in the mighty name of Jesus Christ. Amen. You remember, we're doing spiritual judo, and from the beginning, we're on the wrong thing here. Let's see. There we go. There's the 23rd. So we're doing spiritual judo, and so we're learning how in a practical way to put God's Word into practice in our lives. And you remember your formula, that A produces B, and B produces C, and C produces D, and D produces E. So that is, there's an event or circumstance, there is a cognition and interpretation of that, a perception of that you have that will produce a feeling of an emotion. And that emotions are energy as well as monitors to what you're thinking. And so that will produce a behavior one way or another, and then that will have a result or a consequence. So the places that we can go to change feelings and behaviors that we don't want to have are, number one, to go back. If you change the thinking, the cognition, you'll change the feeling. If you change the feeling, you'll change the behavior. But also, if you already have a feeling that maybe you don't want, well, you might want it. It could be joy, it could be sadness, a positive or a negative feeling. You still have that gap between the feeling and the behavior that you can be response able. You are able to respond. You have a repertoire, a list of behaviors that can deal with that feeling and with that thought. We do not want to repress the feelings and thoughts for very long. You might have to in the moment for some reason, but you want to be able to get that out and express it in a healthy way. And if you can't be with someone to do it, you do it yourself with God and you alone. So remember that. This is, as we talked about, that first defining, overarching scripture that we talked about. This is learning how to guard our heart, for it is the wellspring of life. And so this is a very good method to do that. I am not claiming that this is exhaustive, that there are not other things you can do, but this is something that is fairly simple for us to do, to follow what the Bible teaches us in Philippians 4 and how to guard our heart. So remember this, keep this in mind, and I'll remind you every time. I think you, literally every time that I've spoken to you this time, I've brought this up, and I will continue to do so because of its importance. Take it home and memorize it, but don't just memorize it, use it. It doesn't work if you don't use it. So we want to do that. All right, so we're going to end a major section tonight. So there's just a couple of slides here just to end on before we get into communication. The reason we're doing this is because if you can't manage what is in here, it's going to be very hard for you to communicate to people out there. Okay? And so we're wanting to work on this in here, which is a major part of who we are and how we're going to communicate. But remember that in our formula, B stands for beliefs about A. By the way, yeah, we're good. We're on this computer now. So let me know if I don't advance the slide. I don't have to do that now, thankfully. But B stands for beliefs about A, the event or circumstance. And these are evaluative cognitions or constructed views of the world or whatever it is that has happened. We're putting it together. We're interpreting it in some way. And saying something inside our hearts, inside our minds. And these things that we say to ourselves are either rigid or flexible. They're either extreme or non-extreme. So when these beliefs or these cognitions, when they're rigid, we call them irrational beliefs. And when they're more flexible, we call them rational beliefs. And I'll explain that more. Irrational beliefs take the form of musts, shoulds, and absolute have-tos and got-tos and so forth. And when we do this, we are building ourselves into a corner, backing ourselves into a corner. When you say, I must get a PhD or I am going to be a sad, depressed person, then you have, for many people, you have just put yourself in the corner. You've built yourself in. You're probably going to be sad. And we do this with a lot of things. Now, we do it in a positive way sometimes, but we say must, have to, or got to. And life must be the way that I want it to be. You remember the negative cognitions that we went over, the negative self-talk that we went over a time or two back. Those would be some of the things that would be rigid and inflexible. So when we adhere to such rigid beliefs, we'll also tend to make irrational conclusions from these irrational premises. These irrational conclusions are extreme and take the form of awfulizing and horribilizing. Did we talk about awfulizing and horribilizing before? I think we did, didn't we? So those are two words we made up for counseling. I don't think you'll find them in the dictionary, but it means something is more than 100% bad, worse than it absolutely should be. I spill milk on the floor as I'm going to work, and I say, oh, this is awful, this is horrible, my life is ruined, the day is ruined. And you come and see me later, and I say, now come on, is that really true? And you say, well, that was just a little thing. But your mind, if you haven't dealt with that thought, has still been producing feelings that are going to be coming up to deal with that thought. And you may think it's small, and even the feeling might be just a little bit, almost imperceptible, but through the day you're going to be adding these up, and they can cause you problems. Then there's also low frustration tolerance, meaning that we believe that we cannot imagine that we can endure situations that have any happiness at all if what we demand must not exist actually exists. Okay? I don't know how many times I've heard this. I cannot live if Johnny doesn't like me. Okay? And you're like, oh my, you have just made Johnny an idol here. I cannot live. I cannot be happy. My life will be totally destroyed if, whatever. And so I can't tolerate that. All right? Things like that. Then depreciation. This is where we depreciate ourselves, other people, or life conditions. Life's horrible. I'm a loser. You're a jerk, or whatever. And really those kinds of labels and the depreciation of ourselves or others or life will get us into trouble. And so we're not talking about a one-off thought every now and here and now, but every here and now and then, but actually we are talking about thoughts that keep coming up. And that's why I say try to make a list of your negative self-talk and ask yourself at the end of every day, how many times have I said this to myself today? And then how much do I believe this on the scale? All right? So when our beliefs are flexible, they're called rational beliefs. Flexible beliefs often take the form of desires, wishes, wants, and preferences, which we do not transform into dogmatic musts, shoulds, and oughts, and so on. So when we adhere to such flexible rational beliefs, we will tend to make rational conclusions from these rational premises. These conclusions are non-extreme and take the form, and right here, discontinue that because I've got, this was when I was cutting and pasting, something didn't get cut and pasted right in this. But we can accept the world and life conditions as a complex mixture composed of good and bad and neutral elements, and thus refrain from giving the world or a person a global rating in this. Sorry about that. Was an editorial error there. So here's some things that we'll do when we have rational thinking. We will anti-awfulize or anti-awfulize. Here, for example, we'll conclude that something is bad, but it's not terrible. It's not horrible. It's not the end of the world, rather than it's awful when faced with a negative event. We'll have high frustration tolerance, which means we'll say things like, I don't like it, but I can bear it. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, Philippians 4:13. And I would really remind you about that verse because that verse works on a lot of things that you can just say. It's okay to say, I don't like it. I do not like this, but if I have to do it or if this is the way it is and I can't change it, then, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can, God will give me the ability to get through this one way or another. And I can tell you that's the way we can even do with death and deep grieving. And I can say that's what I did when my wife died in a car accident in Kenya. I did tell you all about that, didn't I? No? I'll tell you about it sometime. But, you can get through it with the help of Christ. You don't have to like it. You don't have to say, this is a great time of my life, but you can say, I'll get through it. God will help me to get through this. And then do what you can to get through it. But as we do this, just remember to be human. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to be sad or angry. It's just, what do you do with that? The feeling's okay. There are no bad feelings. But what do you do with it? That's what can become good or bad, right or wrong, holy or unholy. And then there's acceptance. Here we will accept ourselves and other people as fallible human beings who cannot be given a single global overall rating. Also, we will accept the world and life conditions as a complex mixture. I think I already read this, of composed of good and bad and neutral elements, and thus we'll also refrain from giving the whole world a global rating of good or bad. So I don't like it when I hear parents say to a child, you're bad. I like it when I hear them say that behavior was bad. I don't like it when someone says, you're stupid. But it's okay when you say that thought is stupid. You're not, but the thought is. Okay? Now separate those two because this is huge. It is one of the hardest things that people who haven't learned to do this learn to do, because they think if I feel it, this is the world, or they think if I think it, this is it. But to be able to say this is a thought. And if I have a thought, now has anybody ever here had a thought that's kind of stupid, crazy thought? I don't think any of us would not raise our hands there. We've all had that, but that doesn't make you stupid or crazy. It just means that you had a stupid or crazy thought. It doesn't make you that way. And this is very, very important, especially for our people that are growing up and developing their self-esteem. You know, that behavior is inappropriate behavior. That behavior is sinful or not right or not the best, but doesn't mean you're not. This is huge. It's very important. All right, are we ready to get into a new phase here? Types of communication. So we're working with our thoughts, feelings, behaviors internally, and we're going to be relating with people on the outside. Spouses, people at work, and so forth. And so we need to be able to, as we communicate with others, to determine as we're communicating, and even after, as you reflect on the communication, to be able to say what kind of communication was I giving or the other person giving? What's going on here? So this is going to give you some help to be able to define this. Now I'll tell you ahead of time, give you the spoiler alert here. We want to have assertive communication. And the way that I blocked this off on here, I have aggressive, passive-aggressive, and assertive. And we're going to go over the kind of the definitions of all these and talk about them a little bit. I hope we can get through with this part tonight. But then you see the dash there, and I have blaming, placating, computing, and distracting, and leveling and flowing. That's from Virginia Satir's book on people making. Virginia Satir was a great family therapist. She was really big in the communication. People making was one of her good books. And I just really love the way that she explains some things. And so I like to put those kind of together in this. So again, we have the aggressive or the blaming. We have the passive, which is placating also. Passive-aggressive, computing and distracting. And we have assertive and leveling and flowing. So this is where we're going over the next few minutes. So aggressive communication. Aggressive means to communicate in a way that threatens to punish the other person if your feelings, opinions, or desires are not accepted. In other words, you're bullying someone else. You try to dominate, or bully, I would say, the other person and insist on your rights while denying their rights. Only your ideas, words, opinions, thoughts are correct. You have threatening and forceful body language. And the problem with aggressive communicators is you may win the battle, but you're going to lose the war. And I see this at churches often. You see a couple that looks like they're really doing well, and you think, oh, wow, great couple. And then after a while, you see one of them leaves and walks out on the other, and oftentimes this is what's going on. One person has been a very aggressive communicator, domineering, bullying emotionally and so forth, and the other person may be taking it for a while. They may be passive people. We'll talk about that in a minute, but they may put up with it for a while, but somewhere along the line they get an idea of some freedom and liberation from that type of inappropriate, un-Christian type of way of communicating, and they're out the door. And it's hard to get them back then once they've felt the freedom. They can, if right type of counseling, they go through the right counseling and everything, but this is a place where you might win a certain battle. You may put the other person down and get your way, but if you communicate like this, eventually you'll lose the war. Okay? We'll talk some more about that. Typical of body language for aggressive communication is shouting, demanding, saying others are wrong, leaning forward, looking down on others, wagging the finger and pointing the fingers at others in a threatening way. Okay? You ever do that? Now, with all these forms of communication, probably all of us have done these sometimes, but we don't want this to be the way that we communicate. We want to be assertive, but this is not assertive. A lot of people mistake assertiveness for aggressiveness, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. Also, aggressive communicators are manipulative. They use clever, devious ways to control or influence somebody or something. They put people in a position where they cannot make a free choice. I want to take a moment for that. I'll give you an example and come back to this a little bit. When I was living in Kenya, in East Africa, sometimes people would come to my gate and want things, and we had a group of people. I was working with some others. Elijah would know Rick Truell and some others, our team there. We had 35 churches, new churches that had started in the Meru tribe. And some of them were way out in the bush, in the boondocks, way away. And they would come into Meru town and go to shopping at the market. Well, I had about 25 of them showed up at my gate one day, children, which they made sure were at the front of the gate, and then so maybe 10 children, the rest were adults. And they said, "Oh, brother, you are our spiritual father here. We have come from said number this village and rode the bus to get here, and we bought things at the market, but we don't have money to get back home tonight on the bus." Now, if it was one person or something, that may be one thing, but you ever tried to buy bus tickets for 25 people? That's, gets to be a little expensive there. And plus, and I knew I was being manipulated, but I was also looking at these little children at and I'm thinking, okay, well, how are they going to get home? So I rustled up the money and made sure they had tickets to go back. But I told them, I said, don't do this again. If you do it again, you're going to be sleeping in the marketplace and all. And that was out of love I was doing that. Not out of ugliness, but just out of love, because they needed to learn. But they were manipulating me. They were putting me in a position that it would be hard for me to say no. So what happens is a couple of months later, I see them at the gate again, almost the same ones. And this time they said, well, we've saved our bus money, but we don't have lunch. And they've got the children there, and said, can you spare some chapatis and some sukuma wiki and ugali or something like that? And I'm like, well, again, one or two people, that'd be one thing, but 25 people, you're not always just ready for that. So anyway, I've got everything together and did that, and I had to tell them again, don't do it again, or you're going to be hungry and sleeping in the in the market the next time. They never did it again, but I was being manipulated. They were putting me in a position that it would be hard for me to say no to. With my children, and I encourage this with children, of giving children choice with consequences. So I would tell my children, I'd say, okay, it's okay for you to be angry at me. It's okay for you to tell me that. I would like you to tell me how you feel about me, but to do it respectfully. So if you're angry with me, you can say it respectfully. You don't have to throw something or, do something like that or say ugly words. But I would tell them, I'd say, let's say that they were supposed to make up their bed. I'll say, you have a choice. You have a choice to make up your bed, and you can play with your friends after school today, or you can choose not to make up the bed, and you will have to come home this afternoon and make it anyway before you go to bed tonight. You see, they have a choice. Now, then they become teenagers. That time when you're teenagers and you want your freedom. I want to have all the freedom to make all my own choices, but I still want some money here, but, I want to make my own choices. I want my freedom. So if you've done this, especially when they're little, they grow up knowing, okay, I have choices here. And I would tell my children, I would say, look, I have the same choice. I have to make choices too. If I don't go to work, I don't eat. We don't eat. There's no food on the table. But I could choose not to. That's have the freedom of choice. You have the freedom of choice for a lot of these things, and if you don't do it, there are consequences. So it has to be in an age-appropriate way, of course, but I'm not going to tell them when they're 5 years old, you have a choice. I'll let you drive the car. If you can take the car tonight, if you do make your bed. I'm not making something crazy like that. So make it age appropriate, but give them the opportunity to learn to make decisions themselves and the opportunity to make mistakes and pay for them. Not big ones, not big mistakes. I mean, you don't want them jumping off a cliff thinking they can fly and falling on the ground or dying or something like that. But you can help them and let them sometimes fail and make a mistake. My oldest son, he's one of those that he can see something or hear something one time and he's got it. He learned how to, just went through school, just flying through school until he had to start writing theses and writing papers, research papers. And I remember one time I knew he had a big one coming up, and I said, Joshua, have you been doing your paper, your research and all that? He says, Dad, I've got it. I do it. And I'm like, okay, we're going to see about this. Well, the next day he comes in, Dad, this is taking longer than I thought it would. And so he's learning. I'm like, I'm not writing the paper for you, son. You're going to have to suck it up and take your licks here on that. But remember this day. And he did, and did well after that. But sometimes you have to let them make mistakes so that they see what will happen. Also, if you're an aggressive person, you tend to take advantage of others. You tend to be demanding and selfish. You step on people to get what you want. You use other people. You may feel guilt and anger towards yourself and use guilt and anger towards others to get what you want, giving people a guilt trip, an unnecessary guilt trip. You may have a poor concept. You may be nervous and depressed. Now, I'm not a criminal profiler, but I have a suspicion that something like this exists. When you think of the worst case scenario of people who are aggressive communicators, serial killers and rapists come to mind. And I could see, and I've seen interviews with people who are serial killers also, and I remember one time a guy just saying that he liked to choke people, especially women, to death, and he they were asking him, what do you get out of that? And he said it just thrills him when he sees that moment when it looks at him in the eyes and he sees the life leave him, that he knows that he has conquered then. And so usually when I think of, and I'm giving an extreme, not everybody, thank God, is that extreme, but this sense that most people, when they're aggressive communicators, they feel small. And in the moment of the aggression, they're feeling big and powerful, and especially in a marriage relationship. Now, the woman may be the one who is the aggressor. It's not always the man. But it oftentimes is the man, and it's kind of like I'm big and powerful, and I'm going to bully you around kind of thing. That is not Christian. That is not God's way of dealing with things, whether it's the man or the woman. You think about rapists. Rape is, for the most part, not about sex. It's not that somebody says, "Hey, I'm just so desirous right now, and I'm going to take it." I won't say that doesn't happen, but most rape is about power and domination. Here you've got a guy, and I know, again, I'm not a profiler. This isn't going to happen to everybody, but it's an example of what I'm talking about. So you have a guy that might be henpecked at home. His wife's always on him. He's the lowest guy at the totem pole at work, and somehow he comes to the idea that if he drags some woman in an alley or in the back seat of a car or something like that, he does the rape. In that moment, he feels power. He feels control. He's on top of it. Somebody is having to yield to him. And then I could see that's why rapists don't tend to be one-time rapists. They do it over and over until they get caught or killed or something, and it can be a continuous thing. Those are extreme things. Like I say, I'm not a profiler, not a criminal psychologist, but the person who is an aggressive communicator will tend to feel small. Most bullies feel small, and they're more afraid of you than you are of them. But that's why they blow themselves up. They're kind of like these little frogs. Have you ever been at a lake and you hear something croaking? Rawr, rawr, sounds like Frankenstein or some monster out in the. You go find the thing, and it's a little frog about the size of my thumbnail, and but he can blow his cheeks up with air. He's full of air, but he looks scary. Well, that's what a lot of times bullies are doing is they're wanting to look big and powerful because really they're afraid and they're small. Usually, or a lot of times, if you stand up to a bully, you might get beat up, but usually they're going to back down, or oftentimes they'll back down. I take that with a grain of salt because I did hear a few years ago of somebody who stood up to a bully and the bully killed him. So that can happen, but usually bullies are going to back down. They're afraid of you. This could also be aggressive communicators. Could be a boss at the office who constantly puts his workers down, constantly blames and criticizes them, and talks about how good he is or she is, and everybody else is just a jerk out here. And why are you working for me? People like this usually are feeling small, they're insecure, and they use that bullying to try to, it doesn't work, but it is to make them feel big to themselves, and it's not usually working for them. It could be the husband or wife in a marriage. It could be kids on the playground. But when we see aggressive communication in ourselves, we need to note it and say, okay, I need to back down on this. If we see it in other people, we need to note that, maybe tell them, but if you see it in kids, to be sure that we want to change this kind of behavior. We don't have time in this class at this point to go into how we will go and do all that, but this will alert you to some of that. Virginia Satir calls this blaming. Blamers disagree. You never do anything right. What's the matter with you? I'm the boss around here. But really, blamers are saying to themselves, I'm lonely and unsuccessful. Blamers are fault finders, dictators, bosses who act superior, tyrannical, loud. They cut everything and everyone down. They point their finger, and they're judgmental and critical. The blamer doesn't think she or he counts for anything either, so if someone obeys the blamer, she or he thinks they count, at least for the moment. But it doesn't last long. That's why they keep doing it. Passive communication. Guess who tends to marry who? Aggressive people and passive people kind of find each other. Key in a keyhole, almost. But passive means to communicate in a weak way. You're unclear and you're afraid to address the issue or the problem. You're not strong with your opinion and you do not want to upset or disappoint the other person. You have a confused body language that shows you're weak, timid, undecided, and have low self-esteem. So typical for passive communication is talking quietly, giggling nervously, looking down and away, sagging shoulders, avoiding disagreement, hiding your face in your hand, etc. So this is not a healthy way of communicating. And all of us have done this. All of these types of communication, all of us have done this. I'm pretty sure that everybody in here is a part of humanity and you do it. But what do you do most of the time? Do you do a lot of? Virginia Satir calls this placating. She says that placaters do and say anything necessary so the other person doesn't get mad. They always talk in an ingratiating way, trying to please others, always apologizing, never disagreeing no matter what. Placaters always agree and say yes to everything. Whatever you want is okay. I'm just here to make you happy. But really they're feeling, I'm helpless, I feel like a nothing, and without him or her I'm dead, I'm worthless. Placaters are syrupy, martyrish, bootlicking persons. Okay? Now, I'm not trying to be ugly with any of this with anybody. We all do these things sometimes, but we don't want to make this all the time. Then we have something called passive-aggressive communication, and we have a couple of types of this, but those who use the computing pattern are people who tend to come across as ultra-reasonable, always using big words. And here's an example of something. Now, here's a person who is afraid to be assertive. They're afraid to stand up for themselves and say, this is what I believe, this is what I think, this is how I feel about something. So here's somebody who, they're with some people, they've been working real hard, they're really wanting somebody to help them out, but they're afraid to just say that, hey, can you guys give me a hand? So they say something like, if one were to observe carefully, one might notice the work-worn hands of someone present here. Instead of saying, hey, it's me. I'm tired, guys. My hands are hurting. Would you help me out? But they're so afraid of rejection or not willing to put themselves out there, they come across that. They compute I'm calm, cool, and collected, but really they say to themselves, I feel vulnerable. And so I'm going to hide behind big words and being the intellectual and that kind of thing. They're very correct, very reasonable, with no semblance of feeling showing. Oh, feelings, that's terrifying to them. I'm making myself vulnerable here if I, let you know my feelings. You might use that against me. They use long, big words. The voice is dead and passionless. So that's the computing style of passive-aggressive. Then there's distracting. Words are irrelevant. Words make no sense. Nobody cares. There's no place for me. They never make a response to the point. Have you ever talked to somebody like this? Well, actually, look at politicians on television. Now's a good time. Somebody will ask a direct question. What do you think about this? And they answer something over here. It's not even part of what they're talking about. Well, that's distracting. Now, there is a time to compute. There is a time to distract in certain situations. But we're talking about the normal way you're communicating most of the time. But people that never make a response to the point, they can't go there. Now, we might want to distract if I know that you're a very violent person when certain things are talked about, certain topics or certain people are around, and we start talking, and we're in a group and we're talking about and I can see we're getting into that subject, I may want to distract and say, hey guys, what about so-and-so, something else, to kind of get away from that. Or if it's somebody, and I know that you tend to be violent with them, and I see that person walk in the back door, I may say, hey, come over. Have you looked at these trees over here? They're really cool. There'd be a time to distract. But that's not going to work in a marriage or in a work environment for very long if you do that all the time. So to passively aggress means to communicate in an aggressive manner, but not openly and directly. It's guerrilla warfare. When do you use guerrilla warfare? That's when you believe the other side is bigger and more powerful than you are. Well, the Viet Cong do in Vietnam. They knew the American military was far more powerful than them, so they go into a guerrilla warfare mode, and that's very hard to fight that. So here with this, the wife is angry with her husband for his tardiness to a party. Instead of confronting her husband with her feelings, she burns the toast for his breakfast. Now, if you ask the woman, did you do that on purpose because of your husband being tardy last night to the party? She would honestly say, no, I'd never do anything like that, because passive-aggressive is just below the level of consciousness to where it makes things seem okay. But if you keep talking to her, and this is a good reason to keep, I think interrogators keep at one of the reasons anyway that interrogation keep, because things start to bubble up after a while. You don't always think about it at first, but things start to bubble up that you didn't think about. So passive-aggressive communicators play games with their relationships, and they mess them up. Now here's the gold, and I've been given the 5-minute mark. Assertive means to communicate in a way that does not seem rude or threatening to the other person. Let me let you in on a little secret here. When you're talking to somebody, the more threatened they feel, the more or the higher their anxiety level is, the higher their defenses go. Nobody likes feeling anxious. And so we defend in any number of ways the higher the threat level seems to them. So if you want to talk to your husband or your wife, you talk in a way that is not rude or threatening, in a way that is not harsh, and yelling is one of the best ways to shut down most communication right there. But you're standing up for your opinions, ideas, and feelings or rights without endangering the rights of others. You're telling someone exactly what you want in a way that makes it clear that these are your ideas, words, opinions, and thoughts, and that you believe them to be correct for you. You have strong and steady but non-threatening body language. Typical for assertive communication, know what you want to say. Say, I feel, I think, Be specific and use I statements. You're not saying, some people think or some people feel. Usually when you hear that a lot from someone, it's low self-esteem. Because they're afraid of what you may think of them. They'll throw things out there and say, what do you think about something? I'm not going to answer till you answer. And then I'm going to answer and agree with you. So that's low self-esteem. But use I statements. Look the person in the eye. Don't whine or be sarcastic. Use your body language too. And in other words, stand your ground. Now, let me come back to it. I owe you the Three Little Trees story, and we can't do it tonight, but keep up on it. And also come back and let me tell you about using eye contact, because this is very important, but because it is very culturally determined, you can get in a lot of trouble with that, depending on what culture people you're talking to. But assertiveness is when it is appropriate, you say and express your feelings without having guilt, anger, etc. for feeling and saying those feelings. You make decisions for yourself. You don't have to always get what you want. You're able to compromise. That means I don't get everything I want, but I get some things I want. You don't get everything you want, but you get some things you want. This is one of the indices that a lot of us use to determine how mature a person is. Immature people cannot compromise. It's their way or the highway. But mature people can compromise. They can look for a win-win situation. Nobody likes to be the loser. And people will fight to the death not to be the loser. So if you know you're going into a potentially conflictual situation, try to think how you can couch this and say this in a way that there's a win-win. Hey, you win and I win somehow. That works best. It's not always possible, but it will work better for you if you try. Okay? A lot more we could say there. Virginia Satir talks about leveling or flowing for assertiveness. Voice, words, body language, they match. The person is whole, they're not partial. Your body language matching what your words are. If I come, if I take my pen and I start running at you and saying, I love you, what are you going to respond to more, my actions or my words? Probably my actions, right? So the words and the actions don't match. But if I came to you with some flowers and said, I love you, that would match. So that would be congruence. With leveling or flowing or assertiveness, we're easy, free. There are few threats to self-esteem. The person is real. There's no blaming, no retreating to the computer style of communicating. When you apologize, it's for an unintended act, not for your existence. You ever said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm alive? No, you're not saying that. You're saying, hey, I'm sorry I did this. It wasn't the right thing to do, and I'm sorry about it. But I'm not sorry I'm alive. I'm not sorry. I'm not going to be global like that. So when you criticize something, it's evaluating an act. I heard that. It's evaluating an act, not blaming a person. That behavior was poor. You're not. The criticism represents the truth of a person in a moment of time. It's a snapshot. It's not the whole of anybody. Assertive communication is the ability to express positive and negative ideas and feelings in an open, honest, and direct way. It recognizes our rights while still respecting the rights of others. It allows us to take responsibility for ourselves and our actions without judging or blaming other people. And it allows us to constructively confront and find a mutually satisfying solution where conflict exists. And there, you can look at those over the next 3 seconds. And if you want to know these scriptures, these are sample scriptures about communication. You can ask Elijah about that, and he'll be happy to give you a copy. Right, Elijah? All right. Good being with you tonight, and we're going to hit this some more next time, and eventually move into some things about relationships and maturity. Thank you for being attentive.